Two worlds collided on the cracked sidewalk outside a sleek glass building, one ruled by power, money, and cold contracts, the other by raw courage and desperation. Gavin Rourke sat behind a folding table, the afternoon sun glinting off his expensive watch as he poised a pen above a thick stack of papers. The merger agreement was simple to him, a business deal that would give him control of Southside's forgotten neighborhoods, dilapidated, run down, ripe for revitalization, as his lawyer put it. For Gavin, it was just numbers, land, and potential profit. Behind him, his attorney, a sharp man with a polished briefcase, glanced at his phone. The crowd around the plaza was sparse, the kind of place where deals were made quietly, efficiently, until a sudden commotion shattered the calm. Out of nowhere, a boy burst onto the scene, small, thin, wearing a dirt-streaked oversized hoodie, its sleeves frayed at the cuffs. His sneakers were laced with mismatched strings, and his breath came in heavy gasps as he darted forward, eyes blazing. "Don't sign that!" he yelled, voice cracking but fierce. "You don't know what you're doing!" Heads turned, phones were raised, a hush fell. Gavin froze, the pen trembling in his hand. His calm facade flickered as the boy planted himself squarely in front of the table, fists clenched. "It's not just paper," the boy said, voice rising. "It's a death sentence for this neighborhood." A burly security guard stepped forward, muscles tense, voice low but commanding. "Hey kid, step aside." "This isn't your place." The boy didn't budge. "You don't understand," he said, eyes darting between the suited men. "There's a clause, 4.2.3. It's in the fine print. It lets you tear down every home where families live. No protections, no notices. People like my mom, and hundreds more. You're going to make them homeless." Gavin narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" The boy stood straighter, chest heaving. "My name's Ellis James," he said, voice steadier now. "I'm 12. I lived on 43rd Street before your partner burned down our house to clear the area." Mom complained, then disappeared. "This deal, it's not about fixing things. It's about wiping us out." Murmurs spread among the onlookers. Gavin's lawyer shifted uneasily, opening a leather case and pulling out a tablet. Another figure emerged from the shadows, a teenage girl, her coat threadbare, eyes sharp beneath a worn hood. She approached, holding the tablet out with steady hands. "We collected data," she said. 42 buildings, 12 arsons, all with the same pattern, and every lot ended up in your company's name the next day. Gavin stared at the screen, scrolling through images, maps, reports. Are you saying you've read legal documents?" Gavin asked, disbelief tinting his voice. The boy shrugged. "Better than some of your lawyers. At the shelter where I live, there was a small library. I learned to read contracts. I learned to fight." The silence hung heavy. Gavin's fingers tightened around the pen, then slowly he set it down. "Where's your mother now?" The boy's eyes flickered, then dropped. "I don't know. But if you sign this," he whispered, "you'll erase more families like hers." Gavin's jaw clenched. Then, almost reluctantly, he looked up and said, "Find me Susan Blake, the lawyer handling this deal." The lawyer nodded and pulled out his phone. Gavin stood, towering over the boy, but now with something else in his eyes, hesitation, doubt. "If what you say is true," he said, voice low, "someone's going to lose their job today." The next scene flashes forward. 3 months later, in the same plaza, under the same columns, Ellis stands, not in rags, but clean and confident. The table has changed. Instead of papers to sign a deal, it holds a microphone, a stack of community petitions, and a certificate framed with bold letters, City Tenant Rights Consultant age, 12. Gavin Rourke stands beside him, a genuine smile breaking his usual stern mask. He hands the certificate to Ellis with respect. "This neighborhood's future is in good hands," Gavin says quietly. Ellis beams. The crowd claps. The camera pans out, capturing the rebirth of a community once silenced, but now heard. Ellis James was no stranger to struggle. The cramped room in the shelter smelled of stale coffee and worn blankets. Light filtered dimly through a cracked window, casting shadows on scattered books and papers. Here, in this forgotten corner of the city, Ellis had found his sanctuary. A battered library shelf packed with old legal guides, contracts, and court rulings. A treasure trove most people overlooked. At 12 years old, Ellis had read more legal documents than many adults. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. His fingers trembled as he flipped another page of a lease agreement, dense text, endless clauses. His mind pieced together the puzzle that most ignored. Every phrase, every sub-paragraph was a key, and he knew this one could unlock the truth about the deal Gavin Rourke was about to finalize. If they sign it, Ellis thought, our homes don't stand a chance. Outside, the shelter bustled with quiet murmurs and the occasional laughter of other kids who didn't yet carry the weight he did. But Ellis's world was different, defined by fear, loss, and the cold reality of survival. He thought of his mother, Sophie James, the woman who had shielded him from so much, only to disappear one night after standing up to a developer's partner. The last words she whispered to him were about hope and justice, but hope felt thin now, and justice even thinner. At school, Ellis kept to himself. Teachers saw a quiet boy, sometimes distracted, always wearing that too-big hoodie. Kids ignored him or whispered behind his back. No one knew the nights he spent studying legal manuals instead of playing outside. No one knew the nights he lay awake, replaying the day his home burned, wondering if he'd ever see his mother again. Today was different. Today, Ellis had done what no one expected, confronted a billionaire on his own turf. But the fallout was only beginning. Back at the glass building, word of the confrontation had spread quickly. Rourke's executives gathered in a sleek conference room, voices low but urgent. Gavin sat at the head of the table, eyes still sharp but shadows lurking beneath. "This kid, Ellis James, he's not just some street kid," said Marissa, the head of legal. "He's done his homework. He knows the contract inside and out. He's dangerous." Gavin rubbed his temples. "Dangerous or not, this deal moves forward. The city council has approved the plans. The investors are waiting." Marissa's voice dropped. "They'll sue if this goes through. Community backlash will kill the project before it starts. The media's already sniffing around." Gavin stood abruptly. "Then we control the narrative. Shut down the rumors, quiet the boy. Find his mother, if she's still alive, and pressure her." Silence filled the room like a thunderclap. Meanwhile, Ellis's world closed in tighter. The shelter's director called him into a small office, her eyes soft but wary. "Ellis," she said gently, "this is bigger than you realize. People are asking questions. They're watching." He nodded. "I'm not afraid," she sighed. "You should be. These people don't play fair." Outside, Ellis's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered quickly. A calm voice spoke on the other end. "Ellis, this is Susan Blake. I'm the lawyer overseeing that merger. You've made quite a stir. I want to help." Ellis's heart raced. "Why? Why me?" "Because you saw something no one else did. Because you understand what's at stake. And because you're not backing down." The next days became a whirlwind. Ellis and Susan met in a small cafe, papers spread out between them. Susan was sharp, her eyes clear and calculating. "This clause you mentioned," she said, pointing to a page, "it's a legal loophole designed to bypass tenant protections. If this passes, residents can be evicted with no recourse. It's ruthless." Ellis looked down at his hands. "My neighborhood, my friends," Susan nodded. "That's why we fight. And you have a voice, Ellis." But the battle wasn't just legal, it was personal. At school, Ellis noticed the change immediately. Teachers who had once ignored him now watched with suspicion. Other kids whispered more than ever. A group of older boys cornered him near the lockers. "Who do you think you are?" one sneered. "Telling billionaires what to do?" Ellis stood tall despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "I'm the only one who's telling the truth." They shoved him, a warning more than a threat. Ellis stumbled but didn't fall. Back at home, nights were the hardest. Ellis lay awake, replaying every word he'd said that day. Did I do the right thing? The phone rang again, Susan this time with updates, advice, reassurance. "Stay strong. We have support coming. There are others who see what's happening." He closed his eyes. Morning came too fast. The pressure mounted in unexpected ways. One evening, as Ellis walked home from school, a black SUV pulled alongside him. The window rolled down. A man's voice, smooth but cold. "Ellis James, let's have a chat." Ellis froze. The man's face was familiar, one of Rourke's enforcers, sent to intimidate. "No," Ellis said quietly, stepping back. The man smiled thinly. "It's just a friendly warning. Stop interfering." Ellis's fists clenched. Not a chance. The SUV sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and a chill that settled deep in Ellis's bones. At the shelter, Ellis's resolve became a beacon. Other kids watched as he pored over documents, talking quietly with Susan on the phone, sharing what he learned. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a symbol. The community rallied slowly at first, neighbors sharing stories, gathering signatures, speaking up at town halls. Ellis's voice was small, but fierce. Meanwhile, Gavin Rourke's world was crumbling. His board meetings grew tense. Investors grew restless. News outlets picked up the story of the boy who stopped a billionaire. His carefully laid plans were unraveling. He called a private meeting with Susan Blake. "Enough," he said, voice sharp. Susan met his gaze. "Ellis isn't the enemy here. The community is. Ignore them, and you lose everything." Gavin slammed his fist on the table. "No deal is worth losing this fight." Ellis lay in bed one night, the city lights flickering outside his window. He thought of his mother, of the burned house, the lost nights, the fight ahead. "I won't let them erase us." A slow smile touched his lips. The fight had only just begun. The courtroom buzzed like a storm about to break. Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashing, and neighbors packed the gallery. Southside had never seen anything like this, a 12-year-old boy standing tall against one of the city's richest men. Ellis James adjusted his jacket, the clean shirt beneath still a bit stiff from the day's wear. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady as he faced the judge. "This is not just about contracts or buildings," Ellis began, eyes locking with Gavin Rourke across the room. "It's about people, families who call these places home, and their voices have been ignored for too long." Gavin sat rigid, the polished surface of the courtroom table reflecting his tension. His lawyers exchanged worried glances. The legal documents stacked before him seemed suddenly fragile. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, leaned forward. "Mr. Rourke, you are aware the public has raised serious concerns about this merger agreement. Specifically, Clause 4.2.3, which allegedly permits evictions without proper tenant protections. How do you respond?" Gavin opened his mouth to speak, but Ellis cut in with a quiet confidence that rippled through the room. "Your Honor, if I may, before any contracts are signed, I have evidence showing this clause is not just unfair, it's unlawful. It violates city housing ordinances and denies families their basic rights." He turned to the jury, the community members sitting stiffly but alert. "I grew up in these neighborhoods. I've seen what happens when money talks and people don't. Families are pushed out, homes burned or bulldozed, and no one takes responsibility. This deal was designed to erase us." A murmur ran through the crowd, swelling like a rising tide. Gavin's attorney finally spoke up, voice sharp and rehearsed. "This boy is impressive, but these are complex legal matters, not playground disputes. Our contracts have been vetted thoroughly. The merger will revitalize the area, bring jobs, and restore dignity." Ellis shook his head. "Revitalize? At what cost? We don't want empty buildings or flashy developments. We want our homes, our schools, our community. And we want to be part of the solution, not victims of it." The judge tapped her gavel. "Enough, Mr. Rourke. The court will review the contract with fresh eyes. In the meantime, all actions related to demolition or evictions are suspended. This matter requires transparency and fairness." Gavin's face tightened. He looked at Ellis, no longer a ragged boy, but a symbol of resistance. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted. Neighbors cheered. Local news crews scrambled to interview Ellis, who spoke calmly about justice, community, and hope. Behind the scenes, Susan Blake worked tirelessly, negotiating, leveraging public pressure, and rallying legal allies. She called Gavin privately. "You underestimated them, and him. This fight isn't just about contracts, it's about respect. Change has to start now." Gavin sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Maybe it does." Weeks passed. Ellis was no longer just a kid from the shelter. He was a city consultant, a trusted voice at meetings with housing officials and developers. His insight was invaluable, born from lived experience and relentless study. One crisp morning, he returned to the plaza where it all began. Gavin was waiting, the weight of their shared struggle visible in his posture. "Ellis," Gavin said, handing him a framed certificate. "City Tenant Rights Consultant," Ellis read aloud, disbelief mingled with pride. Gavin smiled genuinely. "You earned this." Ellis looked around. Community leaders, neighbors, and supporters stood applauding. "Thank you," Ellis said quietly, "for listening." Gavin nodded. "This neighborhood is worth more than money. It's worth fighting for." Back in the neighborhood, renovation began, but on new terms. Families were engaged in planning, evictions halted, grants and resources flowed to rebuild schools, parks, and homes, not just fancy buildings for profit. Ellis walked the streets he once feared would be lost forever. He passed the spot where his old home had stood, now a community garden blooming with wildflowers and laughter. He thought of his mother, hoping she was somewhere proud. A little girl ran past him, chasing a soccer ball. He smiled, knowing the fight for justice never ended. But today, they had won.